Welcome to Midnight Horrors. Dive into chilling tales and dark mysteries. Subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. For true scary Mescalero Apache Reservation horror stories. Introduction. Oren Red Feather, a seasoned tracker from the Mescalero Apache Reservation, was no stranger to the mysteries of the wilderness. When his childhood friend Elias White Clay called him out of the blue in 2013, asking for help on a hunting trip in the Sacramento Mountains, Oren sensed something was amiss. The unease only grew as they ventured deeper into the dense forest, where ancient curses and malevolent spirits lay in wait. Oren watched as the familiar landscape of New Mexico's Mescalero Apache Reservation faded into the rearview mirror, replaced by the towering trees of the Sacramento Mountains. Elias, seated beside him, spoke animatedly about the hunt ahead, but Oren's mind was elsewhere. The reservation was filled with stories, whispers of spirits that roamed the forests and ancient curses that bound the land. Though many dismissed these tales as mere superstition, Oren knew better. He had seen things, felt things that defied explanation. The group, which included Elias' friends Alex and John, arrived at their campsite in the late afternoon. The clearing was serene, with the setting sun casting long shadows through the trees. But even as they set up camp, Oren couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. As night fell and the group gathered around the fire, the silence of the forest pressed in on them, broken only by the crackling flames and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Elias shared a story from their youth, a tale of a creature said to haunt the woods, half man, half beast, with glowing eyes that could pierce the darkest night. Oren had heard the story before, but tonight it felt different. As the fire flickered, casting eerie shadows on their faces, Oren caught a glimpse of something in the trees. A shape, moving too quickly to be human, vanished into the darkness. He shook his head, trying to dismiss it as a trick of the light, but the unease gnawed at him. The first day of the hunt was uneventful. The group split into pairs, with Oren and John taking one path, while Elias and Alex took another. The forest was thick and the underbrush dense, making their progress slow. They saw tracks, signs of deer and wild turkey, but no actual game. As the day wore on, Oren couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, set his nerves on edge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Oren and John decided to head back to camp. The return journey was eerily silent, the usual sounds of the forest absent. Just as they reached the edge of the clearing, a scream tore through the air. It was a human scream, filled with terror and pain. Without a word, Oren and John sprinted towards the sound, their hearts pounding in their chests. They burst into the clearing to find Elias and Alex standing over a mangled body. The man's face was twisted in agony, his body torn apart as if by a wild animal. But there were no animals in these woods that could do this. The blood-soaked ground glistened in the fading light, and the smell of death hung heavy in the air. Elias was pale, his hands trembling as he tried to speak. "We found him like this," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Oren's stomach churned as he looked at the body. This wasn't the work of a bear or a cougar. This was something else, something far more sinister. As they covered the body with a tarp, Orrin felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The forest, which had been so quiet earlier, now seemed alive with movement, with shadows that flickered and danced just beyond the firelight. As they waited for the authorities to arrive, the group huddled around the fire, their backs to each other. The air was thick with fear, and every sound seemed amplified in the silence. Orrin couldn't stop his mind from racing, replaying the events of the day over and over. The stories he had heard growing up, stories of spirits and curses, suddenly seemed all too real. When the sheriff finally arrived, his face was grim. He pulled Orrin aside, his voice low. "You ever seen anything like this?" Orrin shook his head. "Never." The sheriff nodded, his expression unreadable. "This isn't any animal I know of. We'll need to get the body out of here and do a proper investigation. You boys head back to town. We'll be in touch." The drive back was silent, the weight of what they had seen pressing down on them like a dark cloud. Orrin couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something that didn't want them to leave. That night, sleep eluded him, his dreams filled with nightmares of the mangled body and the glowing eyes he had seen in the woods. A week later, Elias called, his voice shaking. "They found another body," he said, "same condition. It's not an animal, Orrin. This is something else." Orrin didn't know what to say. A part of him wanted to go back to figure out what was happening, but another part of him was terrified. Whatever was out there, it was hunting them, and it wouldn't stop until it had claimed them all. Determined to find answers, the group decided to return to the site of the first attack, armed and ready for whatever might come. The forest was different this time, silent, oppressive, as if the very trees were watching them. They moved slowly, every snap of a twig making them jump. As they approached the clearing where they had found the body, a rancid smell hit them, faint but unmistakable. Orrin's heart pounded as they split up, keeping within shouting distance of each other. He moved through the trees, scanning the ground for any sign of what had happened. Suddenly, he heard Alex yell. Orrin ran towards the sound, his heart in his throat. When he reached him, Alex was standing over another body, this one fresher, the blood still pooling around it. Before Orrin could react, they heard a noise behind them. They spun around, rifles raised, and saw a figure hunched and misshapen, moving with unnatural speed. It darted between the trees, its glowing eyes fixed on them. They fired, the shots echoing through the forest, but the creature didn't stop. Driven by fear and adrenaline, they chased after it, deeper into the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the light dimmer. They lost sight of the creature, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Suddenly, Elias screamed. Orrin turned to see him on the ground, clutching his leg, blood seeping through his fingers. The creature was gone, but its presence lingered. They lifted Elias, struggling to carry him back to the truck. The drive back was a blur, Elias's condition worsening by the minute. By the time they reached the hospital, he was barely conscious. The doctors managed to stabilize him, but they were baffled by his injuries. They looked like animal bites, but unlike anything they had seen before. Days turned into weeks, and the forest remained silent. The creature was never found, and the killings stopped, but the fear lingered. Orrin couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching, waiting. Elias recovered physically, but the experience left a scar on his soul. The group drifted apart, unable to talk about what had happened, each of them haunted in their own way. Oren returned to the reservation, but the forest no longer felt like home. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there was still watching, still waiting. He stopped hunting, stopped venturing into the woods alone. The quiet of the forest, once comforting, now filled him with dread. At night, he would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of his eye, shadows that flickered and danced just beyond his reach. Sleep didn't come easy, and when it did, it was filled with nightmares. Nightmares of a creature with glowing eyes and twisted limbs, waiting in the darkness, watching. Years passed, but the fear never left. The forest, once a place of peace, had become a place of terror. Oren knew that the creature was still out there, waiting, and he knew that one day would return. Until then, he would wait, always watching, always ready. Thank you for watching for true scary Mescalero Apache Reservation horror stories. If you enjoyed these spine-chilling tales and want to hear more, please subscribe to Midnight Horrors and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. We'd love to hear your own scary stories. Share your experiences in the comments below, and your story could be featured in one of our upcoming videos. Your support and participation mean the world to us.